Welcome to another session of Understanding Human Anatomy. This will be the final video discussing the perineum, and in it we'll start with a mid-sagittal section through the female pelvis. So much as I did with the male, I'll start with drawing in some bony landmarks, and we'll start with the pubic symphysis, which I will color in a light blue just to make it a little more visible. And then, as I did with the male, I'll draw in the spinal column, and I won't be actually drawing the individual vertebrae in, just a representation here as a solid mass, and I'll color that in also with the pale blue. Next, I want to draw in the urinary bladder and urethra. So we'll start with the urinary bladder, and the urethra for the female. There. And next, I'm going to sketch in the terminal part of the sigmoid colon and the rectum and anus. And again, I'm just drawing this in as a large block. And again, we'll color it in just to make it easier to see. Next, I need to draw in the vagina. And then the uterus. Like so. And once I have the uterus in here, I can finish the vagina like so, and like so. And notice that the uterus is tilted anteriorly, tilted somewhat over the urinary bladder. So let me put some labels in, and what I think I'm going to do is color in the uterus to make it a little bit easier to see it. So let me put some labels in here. The urinary bladder, the vagina, the uterus, and the rectum, over here. Next, I'm going to sketch in the muscles of the pelvis. So we'll start by sketching in the pelvic diaphragm. And I'm just drawing this as a sheet coming through, like so. And then we'll draw in the urogenital diaphragm, like so, and I will put in black the perineal body, remembering that the urogenital diaphragm does not go all the way through the perineum. It stops at the level of the perineal body. And then I'll put in an external anal sphincter as well. So, we'll catch up with the labels. The pelvic diaphragm, and remember that is the combination of levator ani and coccygeus. The urogenital diaphragm and again, the urogenital diaphragm is composed of three muscles: sphincter urethrae, deep transverse perineus, and superficial transverse perineus. We have the perineal body, and I've exaggerated its relative size, but it is a very important structure. There. Another structure that I must sketch in is the Corpora cavernosa of the clitoris, which I've done in red. And we'll draw a line to it. And then I need to sketch in the peritoneum. Now I'm drawing it in much thicker than it is in relative size to the structures, but I want you to be able to see it easily. So we'll come down on the rectum, then on to the vagina and uterus, and down from the uterus over the top of the urinary bladder, and then up the anterior body wall. So this is the peritoneum. It would be, for the most part, parietal peritoneum. We may have a little bit of visceral in here with a little bit of mesentery right at the beginning of the sigmoid colon. There. But we wind up with two pouches in the floor of the peritoneal cavity. One is between the rectum and the uterus, and this is the rectouterine pouch. And the rectouterine pouch is the lowest point of the peritoneal cavity in women. So let me draw an arrow down into the rectouterine pouch. Right there. The other pouch, which isn't quite as deep, is the uterovesicular pouch. That's the pouch between the uterus and the urinary bladder. And we'll draw a line down into this pouch and put an arrowhead on it. Like so. It's a low point, but not the lowest point. We also have some blind ending areas in the vagina. We have what are termed fornices. These blind ending pouches in between the vagina and the cervix of the uterus. The one back here is the posterior fornix. And it's this space right here. And the other one is on the anterior side. That is the anterior fornix. And we'll draw a line to it. Now the fornices are formed as the vagina attaches to the cervix of the uterus. And in reality, there's a gutter all the way around the cervix. A gutter in part of the vagina, all the way around the cervix. The posterior fornix is by far the largest volume-wise of these areas. The anterior fornix is the next largest. There are lateral fornices which we cannot see in a mid-sagittal section, but they are there too. It, as I said, wraps all the way around the cervix. One of the things you should keep in mind is the closeness of the peritoneum and the rectouterine pouch and the posterior fornix. If an instrument, for example, is introduced into the vagina and pushed with any force whatsoever, it'll tear through the vaginal wall and the parietal peritoneum covering the vaginal wall here and poke into the peritoneal cavity, and unless the instrument is sterile, it will cause an infection in the peritoneum and peritonitis. This is one of the things that killed a lot of women having abortions before they were legalized. The people doing the abortions didn't know the anatomy. As you can see, the uterus sits at almost a right angle to the vagina. And they would introduce an instrument up here and not know they had to make a big turn to get into the uterine cavity and poke through and cause peritonitis. And peritonitis is very often fatal. So finally, I need to draw in a layer of fascia. I'm going to draw in Colle's fascia, and it's going to start in the abdomen as Scarpa's fascia. As it comes down into the peritoneum, it becomes Colle's fascia. And around to attach to the coccyx. So this is Colle's fascia, and let me add that label. And again, Colle's fascia is the fascia of the perineum, the superficial fascia of the perineum. And again, it is a very dense fascia. That completes the mid-sagittal section through the female pelvis. I want to do one more diagram, go back to the lithotomy position, and show some of the superficial structures in the female perineum. So we'll start with our basic diagram of the perineum in the lithotomy position, and I've cheated by bringing a pre-drawn one in instead of drawing all this once again. And so I'm just going to color in all the muscle layers, this blue color, just to indicate there's something there, but I'm not going to draw all the detail in. I just want to draw in the crura, and the clitoris, and we'll color that in. Like so. And then we'll draw in the bulb, and we'll color that in to make it easier to see. And what I want to add now are the labia. And I'm going to start with the labia minora, which are in this position. Remember, the bulb, it lies within the labia minora. And the two labia minora come together at the clitoris. So these structures I've just drawn in are the labia minora and the clitoris. And then we'll label the clitoris. And then lateral to the labia minora we have the labia majora. And I'm going to sketch those in. And the labia majora meet anteriorly at a small mound, the mons pubis. These are the labia majora. And the labia majora are derived from the same embryonic tissue as the scrotum. That is, they are homologous with the scrotum. And they are just folds of skin that are filled with fat. They do have a structure, the round ligament of the uterus, that passes through the inguinal canal of the female and passes down the anterior abdominal wall from the external inguinal ring and down into the labia majora where they anchor. The labia majora also have fascia associated with them, and the name of the fascia is Dartos fascia, the same as the fascia of the scrotum. So, this completes our discussion of the perineum, both the male and female. Thank you for your attention.